our community. My name is Marsha Marshall, and I'm the Physical and Mental Health Committee Chair of the Warner Robins Alumni Chapter. Today, during this live stream episode, we will discuss how COVID-19 has affected our normal routine and what we can do to better equip ourselves during this season of uncertainty. During this discussion, you will hear from our diverse panel of licensed professionals, but we also want to hear from you. Be sure to post your questions in the comments section, and we will do our best to answer them during the Q&A session. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken the world by storm, consuming our media, shining light on inadequacies and disparities in our healthcare system, and for many of us, dramatically changing our daily routines. As many of us have social distance and sheltered in place, we're just trying to cope as best as we can considering the circumstances. Each day we hear politicians put the pressure on us to get back to normal, locally and nationally, while public health officials are predicting this pandemic to last longer than originally anticipated. Unfortunately, this uncertainty is weighing heavy on many of us and impacting our mental health. So today, we have 3 guest panelists to engage in today's discussion. What's next? Transitioning to the new normal during COVID-19. Our first guest is a preacher, professor, counselor, and author. She is also the president and CEO of the Peabody practice in Snellville, Georgia. Welcome, Reverend Jaye Peabody Smith.
Good morning.
Good morning. Our next guest is a licensed professional counselor and certified professional clinical supervisor. He is also the founder of Mindful Works Counseling Services in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Please welcome Lamar A. Walker.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, and our final guest is a licensed professional counselor, National Board Certified Counselor, Certified Professional Clinical Supervisor, and educator. She is currently the Executive Director of Counseling Services at Central Georgia Technical College. Welcome, Tonja Lee.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Welcome again to each of you. Thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday morning. I'm so excited for this opportunity to engage in this discussion about our mental health and our well-being during this time of COVID-19. So if we're all ready to get started, let's jump right into it. Okay, so this first question is for all of you. We will start with you, Reverend Jaye. If you could tell us a little more about what you do and then share some of the challenges you're seeing with how people are actually coping and adjusting during this time of COVID-19.
Okay, well, I actually have kind of a dual role in the fact that I am a licensed professional counselor. So I see clients in my private practice. While at the same time, I am ministering to those at my church and in the sorority. And so I get a bunch of different perspectives. And I think the most challenging part that people are dealing with is just the fear of the unknown and not being able to kind of plan for what's going to come up next, which I'm sure we'll be talking about all of that. The other thing for me is the transition that people are having to make to telemental health, which can be a little bit different. And so that is pretty much the 2 things that I think I've been seeing most is the anxiety and then making this adjustment.
Okay, awesome. Okay, and Lamar, what have you been seeing? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and some of the things you're seeing with your clients as well.
Well, I'm doing now as everything is shifted and changed. So we're doing telemental health. So my clients will call in or they will press the link on the website and we will video chat like we're doing now. So one of the biggest things now that I'm seeing is just trying to find a routine. Like what does the new norm look like? And, you know, like Reverend Jaye was just saying, you know, how long is this going to be the norm? And so just trying to figure out a routine for themselves. What is that routine? What does that look like? And how long is it going to last?
Absolutely. And then, Tonja, if you could add a little bit more to that as far as what you're doing and some of the things you're seeing. We know that you work with students, so if you can kind of talk a little bit about that as well.
It's just like what my other two co-hosts have said. It's a lot of anxiety. It's a lot of trying to identify what is okay, what is not okay, what should I be doing, which we'll talk about that because that's a curse word in my vocabulary. But that's where they are. And just trying to get them to understand that what they can do is what they're able to do in this moment, and that they are the author of their normalcy or what that new norm is. And of course, those are by the same means as Reverend Jay and Lamar have said, and that is through telehealth, whatever that looks like. Since some of the allowances have been a little relaxed, we're just trying to really help people get to a better place.
Sure. Sure. And so we've talked about how your clients are adjusting, but talk a little bit more about how are you adjusting in your professions. I know we use the word telehealth a lot, and we're in this new technological savvy society, and COVID has kind of like not forced it, but kind of pushed us to that. So Tonja, could you talk a little bit more about how it's affected you and your routine personally and professionally as well?
Well, personally, it affected me because I was really concerned, and in some cases, overly concerned about making sure that I had things in place for my students and for those who would need to ask those questions of someone that they trusted on the campus. And so that was a big issue for me, making sure that we were ready for telehealth because that was a practice we had not yet began. We were in the process of getting it in place. And so we had to hurry up with that. And then balancing that with my children at home who are, freshmen in high school. And not only are they having to learn how to navigate as a freshman, all of a sudden now they're home and having to do everything on computer, and it's mommy this, and then it's Miss Lee this, and then it's, so it was a great adjustment that had to take place. And there was this one day shortly after all this took place that I actually had to just stop my brain and say, okay, you're acting like you're not a 20-year educator. You're acting like you don't know how scheduling is done and how to put things in place. And in that moment, I was able to put everything in place and make it run. And since then, it's been wonderful. And I think with me sharing that transparent moment, it allows other people to realize that it doesn't matter where you are in life. Life will still happen. And you just have to be conscious enough, have that one single moment to be able to put balance in place. And so that's what it was like for me.
And Lamar, I see you shaking your head over there. I don't know if some of those things resonated with you as well.
Oh man.
But how about you?
You're talking to somebody who is truly an extrovert. I like to get out and go, I like to be around people. I like, I had like routines, I had plans, I had, vacations, I had a whole lot of things lined up. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, guess what? You got to sit still. Me sit still? What are you talking about? I don't do that too often. So yeah, it was a big shift. So I had to figure out, what does this look like for me? I had like set routines of, okay, hey, the weekends, this is what I'm going to do. This is who I'm going to hang out. This is, either it's going to be with fraternity, family, friends, whatever. So I had to figure out, what does that look like? So the new norm is just using other ways to communicate with people. So I do a lot of Zooms. We have Zoom parties. We have Zoom all day, just every day, and then communicating even with my family, doing Zooms on the weekend. Every Sunday, we have a Sunday routine with, my mom, my uncles, my aunts, this, that, and third. I think the biggest thing that was tricky was because I consider myself a gym rat. So gym rat with no gym was like, what am I going to do with myself? And I'm looking in the mirror like, hey, my gains are dwindling every day. What is going on here? So yeah, so I had to go on YouTube and see what I could come up with, and stuff book bags with rocks and different things to help with the workouts and milk jugs and everything. Very creative ways of working out I had to come up with. So yeah, and then with my kids, just trying to figure out what the norm is for them. Just hey, we're not going to the store, we're not going to the mall, we're not going on this trip here and there. We're going to stay outside and ride bikes and play water fights and stuff like that, stuff like we used to do when I was younger. So, but I'm adjusting. It's definitely different. I'm ready to get back to the other norm, though, to be honest.
Absolutely, and I can
The other
relate.
norm.
I can definitely relate to the gym for sure, and adjusting with that, and then with kids for sure, trying to make sure because they're used to being out with their schedules as well. So for sure, I can relate to those two things. Reverend Jay, if you could talk about a little bit with your adjustment, and I know specifically we talk about faith-based communities as well, because there's a huge adjustment as we're used to being, with our church families and worshiping and fellowship, and so things have changed there. If you could talk a little bit about how you're adjusting personally, as well as some of the faith-based adjustments as well.
Well, personally, I'm like Lamar. We're friends and colleagues. We are very much those extroverts. And so at first I thought being at home was going to drive me bananas. But I've actually enjoyed working from home. I've enjoyed kind of the hustle and bustle coming down. It's been a challenge because I have 4 children here doing digital learning at the same time while mommy's trying to see clients online. And so that has been interesting in terms of Wi-Fi and telling everybody to hush and stuff like that. But for the faith-based community, I think the biggest change has been, God made us to be in community, to be with one another. And that was kind of part of the purpose of the church, was for us to come together. And so not being able to do that is really difficult. And I think that churches have come up with different ways of staying connected as much as possible, but there still is something missing in terms of that personal touch, that hug, or that interaction, especially when people are sick and shut in or in the hospitals and wanting to go and be with your parishioners and be able to pray with them, and you can't. One of the things for me is I've had to do Bible study online and actually preaching. I'm preaching tomorrow online, which means I'll be preaching to a camera, which is just different. And I miss that, just being able to be with people in their tears and in their hard moments and even in their celebrations. And so churches have done a really good job of making sure that we can provide online messages. Many churches, believe it or not, are pretty much standard or doing even better with financial giving. But I think many of us are still missing that personal connection. And when all this is over, I think that the doors of the physical church will open again and people will come back because they want to be and abide with each other.
Absolutely. And I like that you pointed out that we are kind of like a communal being. Like as humans, we're used to engaging, and that is I know for a lot of people that's a huge adjustment, not being able to worship on Sundays, but with technology we're still able to get our spiritual feeding in. So thank you for sharing that. So just a little bit about, kind of walk it back. Someone mentioned earlier the word anxiety, and we hear that word a lot, and it may be even more so now during these times of COVID-19. So actually, according to Mental Health America, as COVID-19 cases increase, so does the associated anxiety. During the month of February, there's a 19% increase in screenings for clinical anxiety and another 12% increase during the first 2 weeks of March. Could you discuss some of the factors contributing to this anxiety, Reverend Jay?
Well, again, anxiety is rooted out of fear, and the unknown is scary, right? So when you hear about people who can be quote unquote controlling, they're trying to control what's going on around them in hopes of something bad not happening. Well, right now, we don't have a lot of control, and we have no idea what's going to happen next month, let alone in the fall for school. And so all of that unknown creates a lot of anxiety. Now, if you were already anxious, most of my clients are dealing with anxiety, depression. So if you already have that, now it's just escalated. If you didn't have it, I always say emotions are contagious. Well, if you kind of go into the world, especially in the beginning, it's an anxious environment. I made the mistake a couple of weeks ago, since my daughter had been in the house for 6 weeks and it was late. And I figured nobody would really be in the store, and I masked her up, and we did all the things that we're supposed to just to go to the drugstore and pick up a prescription. And I immediately regretted it when I saw the look on her face, because she was frightened. Because living in a world where people had to wear masks, or people, couldn't touch doorknobs, it just did something to her. And she's a generally healthy, happy child. So I think anxiety is just a natural cause, and many of us are feeling it, if not all of us are feeling it in one way or another.
Absolutely. And Lamar, what are your thoughts on some of these factors contributing to the amount of anxiety that we're seeing?
Well, we have that, like Dr. Reverend Jay mentioned, the loss. I mean, the anxiety of the unknown, the fear, but there's also the loss that creates a level of depression. So we're losing a lot of freedoms. Also, we don't know what to do with these emotions. There's a lot of change going on. So anytime there's change, there is emotions that are there. So, and we have our families right there in our faces, and especially as a man, we're like, okay, we have to be strong. So how do we express that? What do we do with that? And we're like, oh, we don't want to panic. But hey, these are situations that there's going to be anxiety, there's going to be depression, there's loss, there's change, there's confusion. And it's okay to have those emotions, and it's okay to express those emotions to other people. So even though we are, we are trying to communicate more with our families, and we may be in the same vicinity of our immediate families, a lot of times we're not talking about these fears openly with them. So that's contributing in too much of it.
Absolutely. And Tonja, from the standpoint, because I know Reverend Jay mentioned the story with her daughter, but from the standpoint of anxiety with young adults, college students, and even kids, what do you think their biggest factors outside of being a new world and the unknown? What do you think some other contributing factors would be to the anxiety for kids and young adults?
I think the immaturity of their vocabulary, it's really an issue for adults as well. Not having the vocabulary, something Lamar spoke on a little bit about, not knowing how to voice their concerns, not knowing how to describe what they're feeling. And when you lose your voice, that in of itself adds to anxiety. That in of itself will allow someone to just kind of internalize. And we all, have to deal with those internalized issues, because then it can become anger. It can become something that's a little bit more dangerous for that person, because now I'm going to shut down. I'm going to withdraw because you don't understand, and I don't know how to make you understand. So it just becomes an issue, which leads to an inability to regulate emotions. So that's generally how that transpires with young adults, with children, and even with some adults, just not having the vocabulary, not being able to say what it is that they're feeling, or know that that's a feeling that needs to be spoken on. At one point I posted something about, ask for what you want, but a lot of people don't know what it is they need to be able to ask for it, because that voice, that vocabulary, those never having to deal with those emotions, it's new for them. And so they do what they do best, and that is withdraw or isolate. And that's a danger.
That's a good one. And you said the word isolate, and it kind of brought up another question as far as some of the terms that we're using, because you mentioned vocabulary, but some of the terms that we're using, such as social distancing and isolation. So as Reverend Jay said earlier, we are a communal species. We like being together. We thrive on that. But when we hear the word social distance and isolation, how does that impact our mental health? And I'll just kind of make this open to anyone on the panel. How do you think those two terms affect our mental well-being?
It's an oxymoron.
If you're an introvert, you might like it at first.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I feel like, I don't know, when you were a kid and you got placed in timeout, you know, nobody liked being in timeout. Like, and you're saying, hey, I have to be in timeout. I have to distance myself and I have to be over there in the corner. Well, how long do I have to sit in the corner? You know, I can't play with everybody else. You know, yeah, timeout is no fun. Yeah.
It's a punishment. That's how some people perceive this social distancing, as a punishment. And that they have lost control. I saw on the news, which I take in bits and pieces. I do not sit there and watch it. I encourage everyone else to kind of monitor that. But this one person said, she said, how are you going to tell me what I can and cannot do with myself? You know, she said, I can't just sit and do what you say do. You don't understand my life. And so people are looking for some level of control in this situation, which is why we're getting people who appear to be violating the things that are being put out there. But we're doing certain things, or certain things have been put upon us without any explanation. At least in school, when you tell a child to go and sit in timeout, although it's a punishment, you tell them, now think about what you did and be prepared to talk about it when that's over with. That's not what they're telling us in this social isolation. So it's a lot of loss of control, something Lamar spoke to earlier about the grief and the loss and the changes. It's hard for a lot of people.
So the way the shift is, so the thought is injustice, which is making people angry. So this is unjust. This isn't just what they're doing. So the way to shift is to look at what's the safety, or what is the good part about this. So what's the good part about staying home? How does that help us? Why is this important? So, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the challenge. It's not being communicated until something bad happens. And guess what? We've already been triggered by some previous or past trauma. Yeah, and now it's compiled with a new trauma. And so we're really just, it's a struggle. Communication is our downfall. It's the rudiment, as my mama would say, to all these evils.
Okay. All right. Well, when we talk about loss of control, because that is a big one, someone mentioned, I think Reverend Jay said, if you're an introvert, you're kind of liking this. And so I will admit, I'm an introvert. However, it's been 8 weeks and I'm starting to feel it. And there are little things that I took for granted, such as hugs. Never thought I'd say that, but those are the types of things that I miss. I like being to myself and recharging at home. But again, it does feel like there's no control in this situation. If I want to go out and see my friends or communicate face to face versus Zoom. So with that being said, what are some ways, with all of this uncertainty and loss of control, let's say when and if things get back to normal, what are some ways we can equip ourselves mentally as we transition to this new normal? And I'll start with Lamar.
Well, there's a couple of steps. The first step is acknowledging your emotions, expressing your emotions, accepting your emotions, whatever they may be. Next, don't forget about your goals. Like, there were goals you had prior to this. So identify what those goals were and see how you can work to those goals. I don't mean goals in just one area, you know. I mean, sometimes, you know, we were focused just on work, or we're focused just on this crisis, but we need to focus on all areas of our life, whether it be family, friends, whether it's health, whether it's spirituality. Look at those areas of your life and how can you improve them, and how can you add to those and build on that. Also, if you have difficulty with expressing and dealing with your emotions, seek help. Find a therapist, find a counselor, so that way you can have an outlet. And if that is difficult for you, at least write it down. One of the most important tools that I've constantly tell people about is journaling. Write down how you feel. Have that conversation down on paper and move from there. So, in my opinion, those are some steps that you can take to kind of get through and manage some of this.
Okay. Reverend Jay?
Well, I believe we have to kind of be prepared for something we might not be thinking about. When things do turn towards that new normal or new life or whatever, I'm anticipating we're going to see a lot of people tired. And let me explain. We're already kind of tired without a lack of routine. It has affect our sleep. So a lot of clients have been complaining about not being able to sleep at night. And I also tell them what Lamar just said is sometimes you just got to journal what you're feeling to kind of get that out so it's not interrupting your sleep. But also a lack of routine messes with our sleep. But what I'm thinking is if you remember when all this started happening, right? We were rushing to get toilet paper, um, downloading DoorDash, figuring out how to do Zoom, worried about money, worried about this. And so we were kind of on this emotional high. Our adrenaline was rushing. And so what I think is going to happen we're going to go, there's going to be a time where we're going to almost physically kind of feel like a crash. Mm-hmm. And kind of like Lamar said, we're going to have to give ourselves space for that too. And understand that everything's going to take a little bit of time, but that it can and eventually will get better, but it's going to take a time. So I guess what I'm saying is not having too much expectation, having our goals and planning for that trip that you want to take, but also being easy on yourself as we kind of go back in, so to speak.
Oh, that's good. Tonja, do you have any last thoughts on some other ways? We mentioned journaling and the safe space and setting goals, but do you have any other tips or things that we should consider as we are mentally preparing ourselves for this transition?
I would like to suggest that the awareness of ourselves, awareness of who we are, utilizing our five senses, and in some case that sixth sense. When you think about, and I'll just talk about the actual organs and not the senses. It's like, your mouth, that's where taste is. And so, be mindful of what comes out of your mouth. Be mindful of what goes in your mouth when you're talking about food, when you're talking about the words that you're speaking over yourself. I would also suggest, your ears, be careful what goes into your ears, what you're listening to. Change that narrative, whether it's music or voices or whatever, but utilize your sense of self for awareness to help you with those things. Even with touch, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. So being mindful of that when it comes to what you smell. For me, my sense of smell is probably my most informed sense because my eyes can trick me. But what you smell, you smell. And so it tells you a lot about your food. I smell my food. It's probably one of the weirdest things in the world, but I smell my food. And if it doesn't smell right, I'm not eating it. So my sense of smell, it dictates a lot for me, even with people, even with spaces that I enter into. There's a lot of information that we can learn and help us to be a better person through our senses. And, you just kind of have to understand that these are some things that can get us into a better place or keep us where we are or push us farther behind, especially talking about sight. For those who have children and anybody who's heard of Princess and the Frog, Mama Odie, she talks about you got to dig a little deeper to get to your heart. When she was telling Princess Tiana that what she needed was right there in front of her, but she couldn't see it. And so when we're talking about our sight, dig a little deeper, go beyond what is visually presented to you and see beyond that. You've heard people talk about your eyes are, the pathway to your soul. So utilize your senses to become a little bit more aware of you and how things have transpired, how things will move forward from this point on. And those are things that really just require you to kind of slow down and encourage. I'm going to use this word mindfulness. And I know some people get a little unnerved with mindfulness and meditation. For one, meditation is a challenge, but mindfulness, I've learned how to do it so well just with eating my food. taking the fork and placing the food in my mouth and actually realizing, oh, this, like I'm this renowned chef. Oh, there's a little nutmeg in this, and there's a little poppy seed in that, but it brings about an awareness of you that you and around you that you never would have thought about, but it is so valuable. So going into this new normal or going into a better you, utilize your senses for more than just what is given and go a little deeper.
That's good. Those are some really, really good tips with the goals and the journaling. I particularly the mindfulness, as you mentioned, or just being aware of our senses and using our senses. Those are all really good tips. And so when we think about being mindful, and Tonja, I think you touched a little bit on this as far as what we are listening to, as well as what we are seeing. So with this extra time and this social distancing, we're on social media a lot, quite frankly. And so we see things, there's positive messages, there are some maybe not so positive, but two things I wanted to kind of bring up just that I saw. So at the beginning of this pandemic, there were posts on social media. One being that if you don't use this time to start a business or learn a new skill, then you've wasted time. And the second one that was interesting was that you know who your real friends are during a pandemic if they are constantly calling and checking in on you. So all of us are adjusting, we know that, and we're just trying to get through it. Tonja, could you talk a little bit about how these statements can impact our mental health and well-being?
Well, just listening to you say them, I feel like I am anxious ridden. So the first thing I'll say to everyone is stop shooting on yourself. Stop allowing someone to shame on you, because this pandemic, for some, it was an opportunity to get something done, but that was because they were in that place. For others, it's not. It's an opportunity for you to just kind of rest. There are some people who were a decision or a financial issue away from something really terrible, whether it was a nervous breakdown, whether it was suicide, whether it was clinical. I mean, for some people, this time was just so that I could rest and not have to come back to a wealthy place, for lack of a better word. So although, yes, a book can come out of this, a business can come out of this, but what we want to come out of this is a healthier person, both mentally, physically, and spiritually, however you perceive that to be. But when someone tells you what you ought to do and what you should have done, it puts somebody into beyond anxious, because now I have to deal with the fear of not meeting this standard that has been imposed upon me. Now I have to deal with the guilt of my efforts not being good enough because I didn't get the attaboy, or you did it, or this applause for something. Now I have to deal with the fact that, am I being bullied into this? And what feelings come with that? So, and this question really could be a WebEx all of its own, because of the magnitude that when someone tells you what you ought to be doing and should be doing, we don't know where people are. We don't know where they're coming to us from. And so we have to be careful with our words, which goes back to that statement about senses and what you're allowed to come in. I was so happy to see someone later post that you don't have to do any of these things. What you have to do is rest. What you have to do is be a better you. And so I cringe at that. The part about friendship, I have a very dear friend. We've been friends for probably 20 years. And if I were to call her every day, Kay would cuss me out. She'd be like, what the H you calling me for? Is something wrong with you? Do I need to come check on you? We don't talk like this. I'm good. If I'm not good, I'll call you. And so this is not the time to be judging a friendship. We have too many other issues going on in our own lives to be trying to make somebody else's life perfect or right or well. That's part of the challenge now, that we are always busying ourselves with trying to meet the standards of others, and we forget about ourselves. We forget that I am just as important, and it begins with me. The way I treat me, it allows other people to treat me. And who wants to be sitting there overwhelmed, checking this and checking? No is a complete statement, and it does not need any explanation. So I'm going to allow my other co-presenters to speak, because that's a passionate issue for me, and it drives me crazy for people to project their stuff on other people.
Absolutely. You mentioned judging of friendships. This isn't the time for that. And then you also mentioned, we're so wrapped up in the business that this is the perfect time for us to rest and restore. Reverend Jay, what are your thoughts on the whole notion of if we're not using our time right now to start businesses and things of that nature, then we're kind of wasting this time, as well as checking in on people every day. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think, I shared this post on social media about all of us being in the same storm, but a different boat. So we're all going through this pandemic, but we're all kind of going through it certain ways, in different ways. Some people are having a really rough time, and some people actually aren't. Some people, life is actually a little better right now. I can't believe how much money I saved cooking, and I didn't even like to cook before all of this. So I think for everybody, it's a different situation, and those that are feeling good shouldn't have to have what we call like survivor's guilt. And it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to be okay during this time. I don't think, I've recognized that I've been almost just as busy as before. I still have clients. I still have a bunch of children. I still have ministry. So except for the traveling part, my schedule is still pretty hectic. So if I don't check on somebody, it's not because I don't love them or don't care about them. It's that's not a reflection of it. I love people the best way that I know how, which tends to be with my words, because that's my love language. But I just think it's important to remember that, God doesn't necessarily make bad things happen. But if we allow, God will take something good even from this situation. And just keeping in mind that we all go through different, but there is a blessing on the other side of through.
Absolutely. And so, Lamar, from, I guess, with the male perspective, because I know some of these posts, I will admit, they were from the female perspective. But as far as I know with relationships, friendships with men, are those same expectations placed on friendships with men? And the same thing with this whole hustle mentality during this downtime. What are your thoughts from the male perspective?
I mean, yeah, my male friends aren't about to call me every day, and I'm not about to ask them to call me every day. It's just, hey, bro, how you feeling today? That's just a conversation that just as men we have trouble with and difficulty. But I have made it a point to check in on some people that I haven't talked to in a while. Like some friends from high school, see how things are going, friends from college, and but yeah, I'm not, hey, how you feel? It just feels a little weird. Like, bro, why you call me like every day this week. This is not cool. But as far as
I love men.
the worrying about what you should be doing, like we talked about those should statements, what I should or shouldn't be doing. People worried for two reasons: belief in history. So they're trying to they tell themselves, hey, I have to worry, because if I don't worry, then I won't be prepared for whatever comes. Or because I'm worrying, there is a problem. So if everything was good, I wouldn't have to worry, you know. Or it's, hey, things have been going so bad, I'm just expecting something else to happen. or
Yep.
things are going good and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yep.
But honestly, worry is a useless emotion. It
Mhm.
serves no purpose for you. Even the worst case scenario isn't going to happen. And even if something does happen, as people, we're prepared for that. People go through all kinds of travesties and they manage to work their way through it. There's storms, there's tornadoes, there's natural disasters, and you're like, wow, this person manages to get through this. People are losing limbs and still managing to go on with their days. So to worry about your friendship, if it's a true friendship, it's going to withstand whatever. And your business, your job, if that job isn't for you, guess what? You're going to find something else when this is all said and done. And so to worry about all of this is not going to help you. You just do what you can do and just keep it moving.
That's why I like you, Lamar. That's why we're friends. So, Marsha, if I could just say, it's so interesting. You always use the example as women, not us, because, but many women will hold a grudge against each other forever and a day. But if you ever watch like men, like on the basketball court and somebody gets dunked on and they about to fight, but when they leave that court, like they are good again. Like, y'all, Lamar, I applaud y'all. Y'all,
Absolutely.
You can't sit there getting your feelings afterwards, bro, it's over. I remember as a kid, we boxing, we get beat up, you're good, we're friends the next day. No.
Absolutely. Well, it's definitely refreshing to hear, and someone actually said that in the comments. It's good to hear a male perspective because I think we do, as women, not us, but as as women, there are some things that we tend to spend our energy and our focus on worrying about, what people are going to think, and especially when it comes to like calling in on friends. So it's good to hear a male perspective on that. So I'm going to actually go into our last question before we go into our Q&A.
Okay.
Our viewers will be by if each of you could give your biggest takeaway or advice for our viewers who may be experiencing difficulties or challenges with adjusting and transitioning during this time. We'll start with Reverend Jaye.
Well, God is still God. So one of my favorite memes right now is, this too shall pass. It may pass like a kidney stone, but it will pass.
That's good. Kidney stones, they're pretty painful, but but they do pass. Awesome. And then it looks like we lost Lamar. So Tonja, what will be your biggest takeaway? Oh, hey.
Yeah. A little technical difficulties, but I'm back.
We're all adjusting with this whole technology thing, but I don't know if you heard our question. I'll actually pose it to you, Lamar. Then, what will be your biggest takeaway or advice for our viewers who may be experiencing difficulties or challenges with adjusting and transitioning to this new normal?
Don't be afraid to talk about it. Just talk about it. Find somebody to talk about it with. Share it. You'll be surprised at how many people are experiencing similar things. If you don't feel comfortable talking to, friends or family, find a therapist. They're out there. We're all over the place. It's just a click away to find a therapist. So this is the opportunity to do that. Take your time and take time for yourself as well. Take time for yourself. Breathe, relax, rest, get to know yourself. And it's okay. It's okay to have these emotions. They're normal. You're human. You're allowed to have feelings.
Absolutely. And last, Tonja, if you have any words of advice or
well, they've given some pretty good ones. I'll just add to the list of the most important thing I think right now is to be kind to yourself. Reverend Jaye spoke about that earlier in one of her answers. But being kind to yourself, and then become aware of you and become aware of what you need and then ask for it. Kind of like what Lamar talked about with, having that conversation, telling people what's on your mind or what you're feeling. And then lastly, be you and share those same attributes with your children, with your young adults, with your spouse, because right now everybody is still somewhat quarantined together. And this can be a learning phase. This could be a bonding moment of how to be you, how to be kind to yourself, how to ask for what you need. And so, and then at the end of all that, breathe. Layla Hathaway has a beautiful song called Breathe. And in it, she says, and I'll paraphrase about how, during this particular time, it seems like there's nothing right going on, but you just got to breathe and believe that this is not the end of the road.
That's good. That's good. All really good takeaways and pointers of advice for many, not just the ones who are having difficulties, but for all of us as we're trying to get used to this new normal. So thank you for sharing that. So at this point, we're going to go and take a few questions from our viewers for our Q&A. All right. So here, our first question, and I'm going to pose this to all of the panelists, and whoever is willing to answer can. So the first question is, how do we handle the fear of being around others? That's a good question. So anyone?
Well, fear, I use the acronym of false emotion that appears to be real. And so, it's not the being around others that we're afraid of. You have to ask yourself, what are you truly afraid of? Mm-hmm. So within this pandemic, we're afraid of catching the coronavirus, okay? Right. So if that's the thing you're afraid of, it's a justified fear, because people are getting sick and some people are dying from it. So that is justified. So you have to tell yourself, okay, is it being around people or is it of catching this? So you want to create a situation where you're safe. So anxiety is danger. So anytime there's danger, you want to create some things that are in place that allow you to feel safe. So you want to, hey, if you don't have to go out, don't go out, Okay. But if you do have to go out, do things that are going to make sure that you're safe. Put the mask on, put the gloves on. And every time that you go out and you do the things that are safe, when you come back, then you'll feel a lot better about yourself. And the anxiety you will see, or the fear mm-hmm. itself, will slowly decrease. The only way to overcome fear is to face it. So after you go out, you put your mask on, you put your gloves on, you have your Lysol, you wash your hands, all of that, and you come back, and after a week or so, you're still okay, then the next time you do it, you will be less afraid each time.
Absolutely. That's good advice. Okay. Our next question is, what advice would you give to the high school graduating seniors? Many of them are dealing with the uncertainty about the future and disappointment from the last, as far as not having prom, virtual graduations, and et cetera. So how do we encourage our seniors as they're dealing with this tough time of COVID? I'm going to pick on Tonja because I know college students.
Yeah, okay. Right now is really hard. As I mentioned earlier, they are feeling some kind of way. I'm not going to say a certain kind of way, but some kind of way. And all they know is that this is like a loss. This is, so they're experiencing grief. They've lost their senior year. They've lost the ability to really close it out. And so we kind of have to treat it as though we were treating someone who was dealing with grief or death of something, because grief is not just someone dying, it's the loss of something, period. And so we would kind of have to get them to go through a process of identifying what it is that they most wanted or desired about that process, and then get them to kind of build towards a mechanism that gives them a safe space to actually operate in, because they have to process that loss. They have to identify what exactly was it. Was it, what about prom that they are upset about not having? And of course, all these things seem really simple as to, well, they didn't get to buy a dress, they didn't go, but it wasn't that. Going back to something that Reverend Jay and Lamar both talked about, it's that socialization. That's what has been lost. It's like the relationships were all of a sudden cut off, and now they're left alone. There's no more unity. There's no more connectivity. There are no more memories to be captured. I know Veterans High School called out yesterday about picking up yearbooks, and I thought to myself, this is going to be a process for those seniors to go pick up those yearbooks and know that what's in it is not a full story because it got cut off. And so that's the process of beginning to allow them to talk about it and to express themselves in a manner to discuss what it was about that they lost. And I think I went out. I'm not sure. No, I didn't. So, but I encourage the other two panelists to add to that, because it's going to be different for boys, as Lamar has cleverly pointed out, as it is for girls, as to how they feel. And it may affect the males a little bit more than it does the girl for a variety of reasons, because for them, that is their safe space. We're talking about sports. We're talking about those type of activities and opportunities that they otherwise would have thought they would have gotten. So it's a variety of things that they have lost. I can't get my.
Okay. All right. I think I'm hoping she was finished with her last statement, since we kind of lost her. But I think we have time for maybe one more question. And so we have a question, and I'll just kind of read it as is. It says, for anyone on the panel, I've overcome my own trials and tribulations of depression and anxiety. You all have touched on this a bit. I guess it depends on the personality of the individual, but I've been coping extremely well with being in the house. Have you seen the same results with people who are used to being in the house versus people who are not homebodies? So as far as, I guess, anxiety, is there a difference? Kind of back to that introvertedness, extrovertedness, and how has anxiety differed between those who maybe are more at homebodies versus those who are used to being out?
You know, I think depression and anxiety is like a spectrum. We all kind of deal with it very differently, and it's not about personality. It's more about managing that depression or that anxiety. Having structure, like Lamar talked about, facing our fears, those type of things help to decrease our anxiety. So if we have less things going on around us, that may actually contribute to our anxiety being less, hence why being home would help in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
If it's kind of like how do we manage our depression and our anxiety? Some people manage it by being by themselves, as long as you don't isolate yourself. Mm-hmm. Some find other healthy ways, whether it's exercising or being with family. And so it kind of really depends on how do you manage your depression and anxiety, and then how are you going to manage it with this. Some are going to be perfectly fine being at home. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If they isolate themselves, then we might get concerned. But if being at home means I have less to worry about and I'm with people that I love, and this is actually helping my anxiety or depression, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I've dealt with depression in my past, and one of the things that I've learned recently is I like to plant and stuff, like, flowers, and like I got these herbs and stuff on the deck that I didn't even know I could do these things, or that they would bring me so much peace or relaxation. So I don't know if I answered the question correctly, but I think it really depends on how that person manages their depression and anxiety, whether being at home or being out, how that's going to impact them.
Okay. Awesome. And are there any other thoughts?
I think it's different strokes for different folks. Each coping skill, well, what may work for you may not work for me, vice versa. Whether you're used to being in the house, not being in the house, I think all of this has affected everybody on some level, with some level of depression or anxiety. How extreme or how unextreme, it varies on the person. So I think if you're anybody that's concerned about their mental health, just as if you would concern about your physical health, you would go to a doctor. So if you're concerned about your mental health, you should see a professional therapist that can help you find the coping skill that works best for you, despite whether you were used to being in the house or not into the house. You just got to find out what prescription works best.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And Tanya, I see you
Well,
take.
I had technical difficulties, so I kind of missed the question, but I think that my two co-presenters answered it very well, and I will just say exactly what they said.
That's good. We'll take it. Okay, and so I see we have another question, so we'll make this our final question. So, how do we have the conversation with younger children about this pandemic and what they are feeling? And that's to anyone.
Be honest.
I would start with sorry.
Yeah.
So I would say just be honest.
Be honest.
Our children are smarter and they pick up on more than we realize. So saying things like, everything's okay, or no, I'm not worried. They know there's something to worry about, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can feel it too. So just allow them to talk about their feelings, but not get stuck there. One of the things we do, my children range from 12 to 26. So one of the things that we do on Sunday, now that we're able to have family dinners again, we talk about what is the worst part of this pandemic, and what's been pretty cool about it. And then the third one will be, well, what do we plan to do, or what are we looking forward to do? And then kind of reminding them it's not always going to be this way. And this, I always tell my kids, they think I'm old or whatever, right? This is the first time anything like this has ever happened in my lifetime. So the chances of it even happening, like, this is just a rare thing. And so just kind of being real with them and giving them hope and giving them a space to talk about their feelings. And then just making sure that we don't get stuck there. And just, that's how. I don't work with children in my practice that much, but that's what I'm doing with my own.
Right. Yeah. I agree with what she said. And part of that too is I'll always go back to vocabulary and the inability to express what someone is feeling. Because I work with young children, and oftentimes the first thing we do before I even ask them, how are they? I let them draw.
Yes.
I let them get it out, or they can play a game. That's what they do. It's kind of like, coming from the educator perspective, it's kind of like our, what the teachers would let the kids do until everybody got into class, we got settled. And so they do that. And then that gives me an idea on how to carry the conversation, or where they are emotionally based on what they've drawn, the colors they've used. Even the structures and things that they built. For example, I had one kid who drew his school building, but his windows were riddled with the boxes look like little jail cells. And I had to talk with mom, and I said, tell me what happened in school today. I gave him another task, and I went and grabbed mom, and she said, well, he came home with $5 and we weren't sure where he got it from. And so his dad had told him that stealing could lead to jail. And so I said, okay, thank you. And I was able to deal with that. So he wasn't going to hear anything that I had to say, because he was thinking about, am I going to jail of course he told me, he said, I found it. I didn't take it from anyone. But all he heard his dad say was, stealing can lead to jail. We didn't give you that $5, and we're going to find out where it came from. And so we have to be careful with our words, going back to those senses, what comes out of our mouth, the way it lands on people. So when you're talking to them, like Reverend Jay said, be honest, but choose your words wisely, because children are so impressionable. They will take what you say and it will become literal for them. It will become the gospel. It will become the truth. And that's how they lead their lives. And let me give parents a little insight on this. That's how we get to trauma. That's how we get to trauma, because it's not just an act. It could be words. It could be the narrative that we create for a child. And so they operate in a world now filled with anxiety, which leads to depression, which leads to anger. And we haven't mentioned the S word, and so I'm gonna throw it out here. It can lead to some children who become adults and never really having processed a whole lot of stuff, to suicide. So we have to be careful and very responsible with our words. Talk to them, tell them the truth, but let your truth be in the form of child friendly, and don't give them words. Let them give you words.
That's good.
So yeah.
That's good. It's good. I like the honesty, but in a way that, like you say, let them kind of express what they're feeling and give you the words, and you talk them through that. So that's good. It's good. So I know we said we had the final question, but there's a really good question that I want to pose. I'm not sure what happened to Lamar, but hopefully he'll join us. But our last question is for essential workers and frontliners who are still working and in a routine daily, potentially being more at risk of exposure. What are ways to continually
I'm not sure what happened. I think maybe my children are waking up, but I didn't hear the last part of that question.
Sure. So what are some ways for people working on the front line, so our medical community, essential workers, what are some ways for them to continue to be mentally strong as they are more at risk for being exposed to COVID-19?
Right now, like we talked about, you have telehealth. And so we've taken away just about every barrier to getting counseling, even if you just need to talk to somebody for just a few moments. And many of us as providers are willing to see those that are underinsured, or we have different ways that they can get the help that they need. So it's just really just a matter of knowing that they too, you can't pour from an empty cup, and we need them. So as mental health providers, to rely on us, we're going to do whatever we can to support them during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Also set your boundaries.
Yeah.
Make sure
Yeah,
you
I was
set
gonna
your
say that.
boundaries with everyone, including your job. So, if you're an essential worker, yes, you're also essential to your family and essential to yourself. So, yeah, if they're trying to work you 14 hours and this, that, and the third, you're going to need to speak up and set your boundaries. I know the fear is, hey, I don't want to lose my job, this, that, and the third, but you also have to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you need time to sleep, you need time to eat, you need to be able to have time to create some healthy routines for yourself. Get some exercise in, make sure you're eating right, do all of
Mm-hmm.
those physical things. And like Reverend Jay said, make sure that you also get help if you need it as well. You need help as well. We as essential workers, you'd say, we want to help everyone else. But the question you need to ask yourself, if the roles were shifted, what would you do? Or what advice would you give that person? So if someone is suffering and they're, not feeling well, you'd say, hey, get some help. So as an essential
Mm-hmm.
worker, you're going to want to do the same for yourself.
Absolutely. And Tanya, did you have any final remarks?
No, I agree with him. I was going to mention boundaries because I think they are important, whether you're in a pandemic or outside of a pandemic, to establish boundaries. Brene Brown has a beautiful book where she talks about boundaries and how they are your lifeline. They are your protective factors. And Dr. Rita Walker has a new book that talks about psychological fortitude. You have to assess where you are in order to be of any source or good to anyone else. And that's going back to that awareness of who you are and where you are. So boundaries are very important. And the quicker you can put something in place, the stronger you will be.
Awesome. That's good. That's good. Well, I think we have gotten through, we've answered the questions in our Q&A. And so as we wrap up this live stream session, I want to thank each of you on the panel for participating in our WRAC Talks discussion today. And then also thank you to all of the viewers who joined us today. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and all modes of social media for more information on our upcoming and future events, including our mental health summit in the fall. And then also let us know your thoughts on today's session and what you would like for us to discuss and maybe in upcoming WRAC talks by participating in a quick poll on Facebook immediately following this live stream. Until next time, stay safe, take care of yourself, and be well.
Bye.